Hello there, shining stars. I'm glad you came back for another chapter. If you remember, in the tale of Despero, the last time we were together, Despero the mouse had just forgiven his father Lester for sending him to the Threadmaster. Let's see where Despero goes today. In chapter 41, The Tears of a King. Despero found the king in the peas room, sitting on his daughter's bed, clutching the tapestry of her life to his chest. He was weeping. Weeping, if you remember, means crying really hard. Although weeping really is too small a word for the activity that the king had undertaken. Tears were cascading, flowing really, really hard like a waterfall. Tears were cascading from his eyes. A small puddle had formed at his feet. I am not exaggerating. The king, it seemed, was intent on crying himself a river because he couldn't find his baby. Reader, have you ever seen a king cry? When the powerful are made weak, when they are revealed to be human, to have hearts, their diminishment is nothing short of terrifying. You can be sure that Despero was terrified. Absolutely. But he spoke to the king anyway. Sir? The mouse said to the king. But the king did not hear him, and Despero watched. King Philip dropped the tapestry and took his great golden crown from his lap and used it to beat himself on the chest over and over again. The king, as I have already mentioned, had several faults. He was nearsighted. He was made ridiculous, unreasonable, difficult to enforce laws, and, much in the way of Miggery Sow, he was not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer. But there was one extraordinary, wonderful, admirable thing about the king. He was a man who was able and willing to love with the whole of his heart. And just as he had loved the queen with the whole of his heart, so too he loved his daughter, the Princess P, with the whole of his heart, even more than the whole. He loved the Princess P with every particle of his being, and she had been taken from him. But what Despero had come to say to the king, he had to say, and so he tried again. "Excuse me," he said. He wasn't certain, really, how a mouse should address a king. Sir did not seem like a big enough word. Despero thought about it for a long moment. He cleared his throat, and he spoke as loudly as he was capable of speaking. "Excuse me, most very honorable head person." King Philip stopped beating his crown against his chest. He looked around the room. "Down here, most very honored head person," said Despero. The king, tears still falling from his eyes, looked at the floor. He squinted. "Is that a bug speaking to me?" he asked. "No," said Despero. "I'm a mouse. We met before." "A mouse!" bellowed the king. "A mouse is but one step from a rat." Does the king like rats? Remember what happened when the rat fell in the queen's soup. "Sir," said Despero, "most very honored head person, please, you have to listen to me. This is important. I know where your daughter is." "You do?" said the king. He sniffed. He blew his nose on his royal cloak. "Where?" he said. And as he bent over to look more closely at Despero, one tear, two tears, three enormous king-sized tears fell with an audible plop onto Despero's head and rolled down his back, washing away the white flour and revealing his own brown fur. "Sir, most very honored head person, sir," said Despero as he wiped the king's tears out of his own eyes. "She's in the dungeon." "Liar," said the king. He sat back up. "I knew it. All rodents are liars and thieves. She is not in the dungeon. My men have searched the dungeon." "But no one really knows the dungeon except the rats, sir. There are thousands of places where she could be hiding, and only the rats would know. Your men would never be able to find her if the rats did not want her found." "Ah!" said the king, and he clapped his hands over his ears. "Do not speak to me of rats and what they know," he shouted. "Rats are illegal. Rats are against the law. There are no rats in my kingdom. They do not exist." "Sir, most very honored head person, that's not true. Hundreds of rats live in the dungeon of this castle, and one of them has taken your daughter. And if you will send—" The king started humming. "I can't hear you." He stopped to shout, "I cannot hear you. And anyway, what you say is wrong, because you are a rodent and therefore a liar." He started to hum again. And then he stopped and said, "I have hired fortune tellers and a magician. They are coming from a distant land, and they will tell me where my beautiful daughter is. They will speak the truth. A mouse cannot speak truth." "But I am telling you the truth," said Despero. "I promise." But the king would not listen to him. He sat with his hands over his ears and he hummed loudly. Big fat tears rolled down his face and fell to the floor. Despero sat and stared at May. What should he do now? He put a nervous paw up to his neck and pulled at the red thread, and suddenly his dream came flooding back to him. The dark and the light and the knight swinging his sword, and the terrible moment when he realized that the suit of armor was empty. And then, reader, he stood before the king. A wonderful, amazing thought occurred to the mouse. What if the suit of armor had been empty for a reason? What if it had been empty because it was waiting for him? "You know me." That was what the knight had said in the dream. "Yes," said Despero out loud in wonder. "I do know you." "I can't hear you," sang the king. "Then I'll have to do it myself," said the mouse. "I will be the knight in shining armor. There is no other way. It has to be me." Despero turned. He left the weeping king, and he went to find the threadmaster. Do you think a mouse can save the princess? Come back next time. We'll find out. Bye, shining stars.